I'm Carl. I work across product and design at Disco. And what we work on is verifiable credentials, decentralized identity, and all of the things that are connected to those. So in the next 30 minutes, possibly a little bit less, we're just going to run through some of the basics on how to get set up and ways to get started to build with us. What we have at the moment are three different things or three different areas for you to use. That is claim.disco.xyz that allows you to go ahead, set up issuance of credentials via a URL that you can go and drop anywhere. So, for example, if you have a newsletter and somebody reaches the bottom of that newsletter and wants to collect that, then you can include a link to go ahead and claim, or invite people to become members or do anything like that. So it's a shortcut effectively to issuing people credentials. The other area we have at the moment is the profile. So inside profiles, you go ahead and you can manage your credentials, you can view your credentials, you can generate API keys, update your profile, do all of that stuff. And then the third area we have is the API itself. So using the API, you can go ahead and send people credentials. That is what claim.disco.xyz is using. You can fetch somebody's public profile. You can fetch somebody's public credentials and unlock some extra power-ups, let's say. So you can issue these credentials from an identifier that is associated directly with you. So I'm going to very quickly run through each one of these three things. And I'll jump in now. I'll get started. I will run through claim.disco and I'll explain as we're going through this what's happening under the hood, and hopefully then everything else should make sense. Okay, so this is our claim site. This is over at claim.disco.xyz. And inside this, we can see that there are lots of credentials that I can go ahead and claim. So we have a bunch of different projects, or maybe not projects. So we've got Masha's Leroy credential in here. But these are just examples of what people have gone ahead and dropped inside here. And I'll go ahead and create a drop, and this will get into the details of credentials. I'll associate with the name, Carl's test drop, or actually, let's just call it Carl's Zoom drop. Skip over the description, actually. Assign it a color. So these are just presentation things, kind of not associated with the credential itself. Now we're getting into the meat of things and the real specifics here. And this is how the schemas are used. So inside a credential that you send or that you receive that is portable, that anybody can custody, that doesn't live on chain, that lives wherever the user chooses. At the moment, we're defaulting that to storage that Disco is providing for you. But inside this, if we go and look at, for example, this attendance credential, we can see these fields here. So we have event name, which is a required field, event date, which is a optional field, and event description, which is also an optional field. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and show everybody the schema file itself here, which should help you when you're using the API to issue credentials yourself. So if I go to github.com, this goes schemas. So this is the URL up here. And if I go into JSON and look for the attendance credential and view this, what I can see is a pretty intimidating list of properties. So inside here, we have this context, the schema, the credentials subject, and expiration date, and a bunch of other things, issuer date, issuer, and so on. The part here that we really care about and that we really need to pay attention to when we're issuing a credential is credential subject. So inside the credential subject, we can see the event date, which we touched on. Where is it? Sorry. Here. We can see the event description, the event name, and the ID. So this ID is the person who is receiving the credential. And in my instance, that might be did : ether : 0x, etc., etc., etc. So if I go back to claim.disco.xyz, I'm just going to call this Zoom call and create this, sign a message to create. Inside this, if I go ahead and claim, what is going to happen here is I'm going to jump ahead now and explain how you use the API, but behind this claim button, what happens is this here. I'll share all these links at the end of the call. But inside here, we're taking in the user's DID, so that is my address. We're taking in the schema URL, so that is this raw link, and we're taking in the subject data, which is, if I go back in here, all of this stuff that we just created. When we're using the API, instead of passing in an ID into the credential subject, what we do instead is ask you for a recipient. And this recipient gets included in the credential subject, and it ensures that the person on the other end actually receives the credential. So if I am to explain what this would actually look like, it would be schema URL, raw.github-usercontent.com/scope, etc., etc. Subject data in this would be, if I go back to this, subject data would be event name, Zoom call, and nothing else, because those fields are optional. And recipient did would be did ether 0x 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. So sorry, not 10, well, maybe 10. If I now go ahead and claim this, great, it's claimed. And what this means is that the credential has been built and it's been sent to my profile. So if I go to app.disco.xyz now, connect wallet, let me just check that this address is the same that I've got connected here. Yes, it is. And connect my DID and wait for this to load for a second. And view my profile. I will in here see the credential that I have just created. And inside this, this credential, we do have details such as who has sent it, me as the recipient. And if I go ahead and look at this, I can see Zoom call. So great, the credential is valid. Everything has happened as it should be, or as it should do. and it is a single endpoint. And if I go back to this, fairly minimal lift to go ahead and get that credential sent out and also catch errors if something goes wrong. So again, when I'm showing you this, I'm showing you exactly how to go ahead and use the API. If I go back to my profile now, we can see that these credentials are private, and because of this, if I'm going to use the API to go and fetch credentials from this profile, I will see no credentials. So to have this work, or have the ability to programmatic or use an API to go ahead and fetch this person's credentials, or my credentials in this instance, go ahead and make this public. What this means now is, as I'm sure everybody's aware now, third party can hit the API, provide it with my address or this DID, and get this attendance credential. This attendance credential will be the only thing they fetch. If I want to make additional information public, for example, inside my profile, I could go ahead and link some Twitter accounts. So what this means is we're going to create a Twitter link. This link is going to contain evidence inside it that you can verify, and that we will verify on your behalf as well, to say, yes, I, as Carl Fairclough, own the account at Carl Fairclough. So you have the ability then to establish how trustworthy a given profile is. How you choose to interpret this inside your application is completely up to you. And if I go ahead now and just add a bio and save this bio, this will now, people will be able to fetch this information. So now that we've got this, and inside the UI, you can go ahead, issue credentials to other people, issue credentials to yourself. And now that we've got claims, so you can invite people to go ahead and claim a credential that you set up for them. Let's get into the meat of the API and things that you can do with the API currently, and also some extra little things that you can reach out to us and that we can help you to achieve. So you're like maybe a little bit of alpha in this discussion. So let's go to docs.disco.xyz, and we will go into for builders. So inside for builders, what you need is Disco profile. We just ran through setting that up. You need an API key. So inside your profile, if you go to edit profile, visit your API keys tab and create an API key. For this live API key. Next. Then great, we've got this API key. I will delete this after this call so nobody goes and sends bad things on as me. But this is the API key we will use inside our API calls. And this would be authorization, bearer token, type authentication. So if I now go back to our docs and view API endpoints, these are the capabilities that are available to you. So you can get a profile by DID, so provide the DID. You can get the profile by ETH address, so that's just 0x1234. You can search for profiles by account linkage. So what this means is, if I go and open this, you provide a handle. So, for example, I might try Carl Fairclough, and that will return my profile, or a list of profiles that have that linkage. So if there is a Carl Fairclough Twitter and Carl Fairclough Discord, it will return those two things. We can also get all of a user's public credentials. So if you go ahead and view this, we can get them by DID. So we just pass in the DID inside the path. So api.disco.xyz/v1/profile/did:3:kj, etc., etc., etc. And that will return all of those public credentials. You can also go ahead and get a credential by type. So this is related to the schemas now. So I want to check that you have an attendance credential, for example, the one I just created via the claim link. What I will do then via this API call is I will hit api.disco.xyz/profile, pass in the did that I know from the user who's come to my application, and then add this, and the type of this credential is going to be contained inside the schema. So if I go to the schema and look for the type, there should be attendance inside here. So yeah, this is the type, this attendance credential. And as soon as you have that, then you can go ahead and request that credential and go ahead and check whether that credential matches the things that you're looking for. So inside that credential, you might have issuance date. Does that issuance date fit what you are looking for? Does the recipient, for example, match the person who is presenting it? Does it have an expiration date, which we haven't covered? But if it has an expiration date, you might want to check that it isn't expired. And a whole bunch of parameters that you're going to get back based on the schema. So if I now go ahead to verify a credential, this touches on what I was just saying. So I get the credential back. I can now send it back to the API endpoint to check whether it's actually valid. Does the signature inside this credential fit the contents? Is it a valid signature, or is it being faked? This is what we're going to use this endpoint to check. So inside this endpoint's body, we send a post request. We use the authorization token that we mentioned at the beginning. And then in the body, we pass a VC parameter and go ahead to send the VC and receive a response. And inside the response, we will be able to understand whether this credential is valid or not. And then programmatic issuance is what we just touched on inside this file here. So what I'm showing you now is programmatic issuance. Programmatic issuance accepts the schema URL, which we touched on, subject data, excluding the ID, which we touched on, and the recipient did, which is who you want the credential to go to. So inside your application, what we are looking for is, or things that will be really interesting to see people do is, if we look at integrations, Guild has introduced the ability to gate a Telegram service using Guild. you can gate a Discord server using Guild and these verifiable credentials. And we also have gated NFT drops. So if you hold a certain credential and you verify that you are the current holder of that credential, you get access to a NFT drop. And we do have some demos and templates inside the API at the moment that you can go ahead, inside the docs at the moment that you can go ahead and look at, which basically give you another run through of what I've just run through right now. But if you just give me one moment, I'm going to go ahead and remind myself of some other things and some other really interesting things that we think you can do with this kind of credential is taking digital assets from the screen to your phone. So can you embed a claim link for others to claim with a piece of visual or digital content? What is a really interesting vehicle to get your claim link to other people? So this isn't really a technical idea. It's more of a very, I guess, like delivery focused idea. What does that last mile look like? What is the UX of presenting somebody with an invitation to receive a credential? We also think a really interesting thing to work on would be a quiz app. So if you think about BuzzFeed and that kind of thing, the ability to say, hey, I am a certified, I don't know, degenerate or something like that is like quite a fun little collectible, perhaps. And the ability then to go ahead and present that collectible in your profile makes credentials very ephemeral, but also maybe quite fun. As well as this, we do think there are lots of things that you could do that are much more complex. For example, how do you measure somebody's I don't want to say Sybil resistance or whether you can verify that somebody is human or not, but how might you be able to encode the value of a given account? So if you take somebody's Twitter account and you ask them for a given credential or a given set of credentials, or maybe even provide them with additional credentials, can you then use that to rank a profile, kind of like a DGen score? How can you build a DGen score using both on-chain and off-chain data? And then on top of that, how might we build privacy-preserving algorithms to generate insights? So as opposed to generating a given score, what kind of richer things might we be able to do with that score? Or how might you make that score more nuanced? So maybe it applies across different sections. In this category, this person is in being a DGen, they're a 10 out of 10 in I don't know, like posting on Twitter, they're a certain kind of profile. How can you provide that to the user?
I love the examples, Carlos. Thank you so much. The presentation is really clear. I'm just wondering, going back to the example that you gave, like with Guild, because the tech stack of Disco is so cool. You can already do like so much, and I'll let the others ask questions if they have any. I'm just wondering, in terms of use cases that you mentioned, how would you see like other tech stacks of the hackathon? Like if you were a builder hacker and you were mainly using Disco, you mentioned Guild. Do you see any kind of other potential examples of like, okay, I'm going to use Disco as the principal tech stack, but I can also maybe use Ceramic or I don't know, Orbis or something like that. Don't want to put you on the spot, but it's just like
No.
any
It's
ideas
good.
that come to your mind, like the one with Guild. But the presentation was super clear, and also let if anyone else in the chat wants to ask a question, go for it.
It's a good, like, for example, with Ceramic, somebody might have different identifiers. So they might have did PKH. Sorry, I'm getting into the weeds here, but they might have credentials that are specific to NEAR, for example. They might have, excuse me, credentials that are specific to other networks. How might we bring all of those things together, and including credentials that might or might not live on Disco? How can we bring all of those things together and use them to basically generate, like I said, an aggregate kind of score for that given profile, based on different criteria. So that's how I imagine the different projects being pulled together. And then, for example, those scores, for example, you could go ahead and use in Guild.
Perfect. There's a question in the chat. I'll read it out loud from Simonas. Sorry, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if not. It's when, sorry, I lost the question. When issuing a credential using an API key, what DID will be an issuer of the credential? Are you managing signing keys for every API key?
Yeah, okay. So if you use the API key in the format that I just ran through, the issuer of this credential will be Disco. So Disco will be issuing that credential on your behalf. However, if you reach out to myself or Masha being on this call, what we will do is allow you to issue a credential from an identifier that is tied to you. So, for example, if you as NEWFORUM want to go ahead and issue a credential, then we will get that set up so the identifier that is issuing the credential is NEWFORUM. There are also endpoints where you can go ahead and sign the credential yourself, whether that's client side or in the backend, in your own backend, and post that to somebody's Disco profile.
Perfect. Did that answer the question for you, Simonas? Perfect. Any final questions before I give the final words to Carl? I don't know, Riley or anyone else, if you have something. Don't want to put anyone on the spot, so if not, I'll give the final words to Carl to close this up.
Give you 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
I was just gonna say we can also just drop in Turbo ETH as a resource for some builders if that would be helpful as well. I'm gonna drop it in the chat.
Awesome. And I saw you also put your contacts for anyone that has like specific questions. Of course, there's your Discord, your Twitter, and all right.
Yeah.
Then I guess on this note, well, I'll give you once again the final words, Carl. But if not, thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and Carl for the great explanation. And any final words before I close out the conversation?
Final words would be any questions, any issues, anything you would like to see, please reach out, and we'll work with you to help, do whatever it is you're trying to do. So we're trying to be super flexible. We're trying to build things for you. So yeah, we're here to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much.